Hey, ethics class, let's dive back in here to our chapter that we've been discussing this week. Today we want to move to some more definitions to start and then to some ethical theory things. Let's start with our definitions. Legalization is the process of making the production and sale of drugs legal. You have to have a legalization of both the production and then the sales and actually probably possession as well needs to be a part of this particular definition for something to be legalized. Now, there are some differences here about criminalization and then decriminalization. Criminalization makes the use and possession, and I added that phrase there, of drugs a criminal offense, meaning not only do you get in trouble for using it if you just have it, if you are transporting it, if it's in your possession, if it's in your car, if it's on your person. Decriminalization is allowing the use of drugs without incurring criminal penalties. So for a while there was this big argument and this big push about, well, let's decriminalize marijuana. Well, that would have been fine, except if it's not fully legalized, then people could still be punished for growing marijuana, but you just couldn't be punished for using marijuana. Well, if everybody wanted to use it, but people weren't allowed to grow it, there was going to obviously be some issue and some problem there. And so that's why you quickly usually go from decriminalization to legalization when that sort of thing happens, because it's kind of like the cart and the horse, and you can't have one without the other. Or the old Frank Sinatra song, Love and Marriage, they go together like a horse and carriage. Harm reduction. A drug policy aimed at reducing the harm that arises from drugs, but notice this, and drug laws. Here's a criterion, Douglas Husak, let me just read part of this quote to you. Drug policy initiatives are almost always evaluated by the criterion we should reject, the test of use reduction. In other words, at the present time, no suggestion about how to improve our policy will be accepted unless it offers the potential to reduce the numbers of persons who use drugs. Theorists who favor standard of harm reduction point out the total amount of harm that drugs cause in our society might actually decrease, even though the number of drug users would increase. Harm reduction takes in not only the use of drugs, but the laws that punish people who use drugs. For example, they would say that harm comes not just when a person is using marijuana or using cocaine, but that there's also harm when that person who is addicted to cocaine gets arrested and, because it's his third offense, gets put in jail for a long period of time. Now the family is harmed and the person is harmed. And so part of Husak's argument is that some drugs should be legalized because overall it would lower the harm that drugs cause, even though it might allow the number of drug users to go up. But the overall harm would be taken away because some people who might have previously been sent to jail or separated from families no longer would be, based on their particular drug use of choice. And so it's just an interesting dynamic to think about, that would easing drug laws actually lower the amount of harm that drugs do. And again, this is back to the original argument about this war on drugs that America has been in for years and years, that has actually shown itself to not be very effective, at least in the grand scheme of things, the results of it. Not saying I'm for drugs at all, but saying this idea of a war on drugs maybe hasn't always functioned the way they would want it to. Does legalizing medical marijuana encourage use among teenagers? Between 99 and 2006, 10 states legalized medical marijuana. Existing data show that during this period, there was no statistically significant rise in teen use in these states. There was a statistically significant drop in 4 of the states. So some people say if you legalize it, everybody's just going to be smoking, everybody will be using it all the time. And some of the data suggests that that's not the case. That's not what happens when it becomes more available. Go over our theories. Utilitarianism. A utilitarian would look at maximum happiness. So on the positive side, you have pleasure, euphoria, respite from stress. On the negative side, you have addiction, dependence, withdrawal, arrest, prosecution, imprisonment. And a utilitarian would look at the idea of the harm theory again, the overall harm that drugs do, both in use and in prosecution. And so that would weigh into their argument of the happiness of everyone considered. And so that would be a significant thing a utilitarian would think about. Kant, two things. He said, when we use illicit drugs, we use ourselves as a means to an end. And so he would be against it because we treat ourselves, again, as just vehicles for pleasure. It violates the categorical imperative to never use persons as a means, but always use people as ends and not means. And he also says that our autonomy is actually harmed when we allow these substances to come into our body because it takes over. You're no longer making choices for yourself. The drugs are driving that choice. You'd say, well, I'm still deciding. Yes, but you're deciding in a very impaired state. And so if you're in an impaired state, you're not really deciding. The drugs become a driving force. You guys know as well as I do, when we watch certain movies and videos and things on TV, we see people addicted to drugs, and they are very out of control. They are very unable to control their own faculties, their decision making, all sorts of things like that. I really wish we were together. I don't know how to do this. There is a HBO documentary called Ice Storm, or Meth. It's called Meth Storm, about drug use, and a lot of it was recorded here in Faulkner County, Stone County, Van Buren County, this area, and it aired on HBO several years ago. And it involves some people that are just, when you watch that, you see they lose all their ability to control themselves. And so Kant would be against it because of that. Natural law would condemn recreational drug use because, it dictates nature doesn't do this. Animals don't use drugs recreationally. And then addiction is a problem. Autonomy is weakened, that we've already talked about. And again, you don't treat people fairly. So when you're high, so moral law kind of goes out the window as well. So natural law would be against it. Here's the essential question. Under what circumstances is the government justified in preventing or stopping people from using drugs recreationally? And so there's three principles here we have to draw from: harm, paternalism, and legal moralism. Okay, so let's think about those for just a minute. Harm says that the government is justified when they keep people from hurting each other. Okay, drug users hurt other people. They burden society with the law of drug enforcement, drug treatment, prosecution, jail. Even if they don't, quote unquote, physically hurt someone else, the tax money, the amount of revenue that has to go into their rehab, their imprisonment, all those sort of things. The fact that a lot of times someone who's addicted to drugs can't keep jobs, can't do certain things, is a problem. And so it harms everybody. They would favor policies based on use reduction. James Wilson, quote here, the notion that abusing drugs such as cocaine is a victimless crime is not only absurd, but it's dangerous. Because it does affect others. No individual is an island. No one is by themselves. Anyone who makes that choice, it has ripple effects on people that they know, and then people that they've never met, because of the overall effect on society. And again, I'm not talking about like a one-time use. I'm talking about someone who gets addicted. The problem is that any of you listening to this say, well, I could use it one time. No, we don't have any control of that. That's literally the definition of addiction, that you lose control. And none of us know that I'll just do once and then be done. It gets a hold of you. And again, if you've seen someone who has really been addicted, you know what I'm talking about. The application of the principle to support decriminalization. Harms of illicit drugs are exaggerated based on worst case scenarios. Maintain that most of the harms that accompany drug use are not the result, but of policies. So someone who wants to decriminalize it would say it's not the drug use, it's all the policing we do of the drugs. If we would quit worrying about it and just let them kind of take care of themselves, all the harm would go away. And so here's a quote. Theorists who favor standard of harm reduction point out the total amount of harm that drugs cause in our society might actually decrease. And this is the one we used a minute ago, even though the number of users might increase. So again, someone who wants to decriminalize it based on the harm principle would say that what harms is not drug use, but is the policing of drug use. And so you have kind of that other side of the argument there. If you favor decriminalization, trying to judge the issue by utilitarian standard, by weighing harms and benefits, is the wrong approach. The real issue here is not harms, but justice. Someone for breaching a law, if you punish someone for breaching a law, you decide it based on what's just, not on what harms people. We can't look at the results of crimes and then try to make a judgment. There has to be a moral standard. It's right or it's wrong. People are rational, autonomous. They make choices, and we have to judge them based on those choices. And if these are the laws that are in place, then we judge them based on those laws, not on the harm that results in either enforcing or not enforcing the law. Law has to be kind of blind to some of that stuff, and so that's a big deal, and you have to really think about that. Okay, and that's kind of a place for us to stop today, because I want you to think about this. I need probably a page, one page, on what you think about the harm principle. Answer this question. Do you think that we are more harmed by the use of drugs in our society, or are we more harmed by the policing of the use of drugs in our society? And so that's your question to answer for today, ethics class. All right. Love you guys. Hope you're doing well. If there's anything you need from me, you know where to get a hold of me. So just let me know at any point and be glad to help you. All right. Love you guys. Have a good and godly day.